All right, everyone. Well, we've got some very exciting stuff to get into today because we have some leaks for Raid Shadow Legends in the form of data mined info, including a lot of information about some upcoming factions. So we know that there's going to be 3 factions that are coming to the game. And if you take a look at the index, you can see here that we've got room for 16 factions. And of the 16 factions, there's kind of these 4 groups here. We've got the Talarians, the Galen Pact, the Corrupted, and the Nyresan Union. And you guys will see in a second here why that's actually pretty important to the leaked information that we have. Now, this information is coming in the form of data mined info, so we have access to this in the actual game files, but it either hasn't been released yet, or in some cases, and this is kind of a disclaimer, a good amount of the time, data mined info is in the game files, but not in the official version, because the developers either made a lot of changes to it, they delayed it, and it just somehow never actually made it to the official version of the game. But let's take a look at the actual factions, and there's going to be 3 factions coming to the game, and we have the images for all 3 of those factions, but one of them in particular, we have a lot more information besides the images. We actually have the name for it, as well as some of the jewelry for that faction, and that is this one right here. So you can see the actual faction portrait, and we have the name for this, and it's going to be the Nyresan Elves. So you can see why now that the grouping of the factions is kind of important, because it is going to be a part of the Nyresan Union. Now, not only do we have the faction portrait and the name of it, but we also have a couple of images of that faction's jewelry. So we've got the banner, we've got the necklace or the pendant, and we also have the ring here as well. Now, if you guys are wondering how we got the name Nyresan Elves, if you take a look at the data mined info, you could see the different accessories as well as the factions that they correspond to. So, you know, this is the actual list right here. We've got the Knight Revenant, and then of course you've got the banner, the pendant, and the ring. Then we've got the Lizardmen, banner, pendant, and the ring. And then right after that, in the data mined info, we have the Nyresan Elves, banner, pendant, and ring. And of course, that corresponds to these accessories right here. So it is in the game files what the name of that faction is going to be, but it gets even more exciting as well. And I'll show you guys, because each of the factions that are in the champion index, there's actually a number that each of these factions is associated with, and for the most part it makes a lot of sense, but there's something very, very interesting about this. So let me show you guys what this is right here. So we've got all 16 factions that are kind of in the index. Of course, 3 of them are not in game right now, but we do have the images for all 3 of those. Now, one of them, of course, was the Nyresan Elves, which we have the name and the accessories for. Now, the other 2 factions that we don't know much more besides the actual portrait for what they are supposed to be is going to be number 15 on this list. Number 14, of course, was that Nyresan Elves. So 15 is also new, and surprisingly, it's actually number 4. So number 4 is the faction that we don't have available, but the numbers don't really make a whole lot of sense. Now, if you go back to the index here, you'll see that for the most part, most of these factions, the number corresponds with kind of what position they are in the actual index. So, you know, you got your Banner Lords at number 1, you got your High Elves at number 2, you've got your Sacred Order at number 3, but number 4 is where things get a little bit crazy, because Barbarians is not actually number 4 on the list. It is number 13, and instead we have one of the factions not available to us as number 4 in the list right here. But then once we get to number 5 and go back to the Ogryn tribes, things get back to normal. So, you know, Ogryn tribes, Lizardmen, Skinwalker, Orcs, Demon Spawn, Undead Hordes, Dark Elves, and Knight Revenants all correspond to the numbers that make sense in this actual list right here. Now, once we get to number 13, that's of course when things get crazy again with the Barbarians, which actually, to me, I've been thinking about this. There is possibility maybe the Barbarians were originally planned to be part of the Nyresan Union. Maybe the faction that they had for the Talarians that we don't have available to us right now was originally planned to be released earlier on, and they just didn't finish it up. Maybe they didn't have enough champions for it, or there were some other technical reasons, and they had to actually make some adjustments and move the Barbarians faction into the Talarians and kind of delay the release of one of the Nyresan Union factions. But number 13 is not actually dwarves. It would be 13 if we were going by the order here, but it looks like they actually released dwarves number 16 as the first of the Nyresan Union factions. And now we have the elves, which are number 14, and then we've got number 4, which is the one that's kind of mismatched with barbarians. And also the last of the 3 factions is number 15, which unfortunately we don't really know much information about that one as well. But at least we have the images, a little bit of, kind of what to look forward to in the future. Now, something important as well is the Plarium, they had a investor meeting where they actually kind of went into the future of Raid Shadow Legends and their plans, and they did talk about one of the upcoming factions and how they wanted to make one of the upcoming factions Asia themed. So I'm wondering, in this list right here, which of those 3 factions that we don't have available to us is that Asia themed faction that they plan on releasing, and is that going to be the next faction released, or is it going to be one of the ones after that? So lots of interesting stuff about this, and still plenty more mysteries to kind of explore and figure out more about. Now, this is pretty much everything about the actual factions, but there is indeed still quite a bit of data mined information that we have access to where there's no match to what that is supposed to be in game. So I'll just go ahead and show you guys. This picture is probably going to blow your mind a little bit. It's a bit crazy, but I'll explain what this is, and I have a better version of it as well, of course. But wow, so this is all of the different portraits that are in Raid Shadow Legends, in the data mined info anyway. And pretty much these all represent different champions that we actually have in the game. But there are also some portraits that represent certain boss fights, for example. But the information that we have through the data mine files, there's a lot of champions. Most of them have been accounted for. Me as well as Goctionni, who, big shout out, because he is the one who has provided this information and who has been going through the past couple of days kind of trying to decipher and figure out a lot of this stuff. But there are still images in the data mined info and portraits where we cannot actually find a match for what that portrait is supposed to represent. So this is pretty much all of them. In fact, I think this image actually is all of them. Here's a little bit of a better version without all of them, just so you can see the resolution a little bit. And another interesting thing about this is the numbers. So each of these different portraits also has a number, 4 or 5 digits. Now, what we found is that the 4-digit ones are going to be for champions, like champions that we have in game, and the 5-digit ones are what was probably originally intended for as bosses. Now, the numbers and the order also has meaning as well, because it's going to go in a particular order, and generally speaking, the champions that have a lower number, of course, are older champions. So whenever the artwork or the portraits for these champions was finished and actually put into the game files, that's kind of where they're going to represent what number they are in the actual files. So generally speaking, of course, all the old champions will have lower numbers, all the newer champions will have higher numbers, but it's not 100% like that. Now, there are plenty of champions that we were not able to actually find a match for, and I will say we did find one of them so far, but in that same time we also found another new one that we can't find a match for. So as of right now, I have, I believe, 9 or 10 of them where there is a portrait that is in the data mine files, but there's no actual match that we can find for what that portrait is supposed to represent. So I want to show you guys what these images are, and maybe you recognize it, maybe we missed 1 or 2 of them. Very well possible. There's a lot of champions, bosses, and just portraits in the actual game. But we also went through, and the numbers that these unidentified portraits represent is of significance as well, because there are a couple of older ones which are going to be like 3590, 3660, and those are probably going to be most likely stuff that was put into the game files a long time ago that just never actually made it to the game. Maybe they made a bunch of changes to it and it just kind of stayed in the game files, or maybe it's just been postponed for a really, really long time. But it's the later numbers, things like 4650 and 4640, where there's a possibility that those are just champions that we have in the game files, but they haven't actually been released, and they're going to be coming out soon. So, all right, I want to show you guys. Now, the first portrait is actually number 5 in this list right here, which I believe is 3990. We did find the match. This is Candrafon. Don't tell me how I knew this, because I might have more than one of this guy, but Yeah, that was number 5. But let's go to number 1 on that list, which was, I believe, 36. Let's see, it was 3660, right? Or 3590, sorry. 3590 is this guy right here. And I did notice that this guy does look familiar, but he's still a little bit different. Because if we go to the Lizard Men, you'll see that he looks a lot like Nyresan Scarhide, right? But he's not red, he's green. So he's like the green version of Nyresan Scarhide. So, you know, what does this mean? Was Nyresan Scarhide originally intended to be a spirit champion? Or maybe he was supposed to have, you know, an evil twin? Well, I guess Nyresan might even be evil already, but maybe he was supposed to have a twin that was a spirit version, or maybe, you know, who knows? But because this is an older game file, there's a high chance that this is not going to be a champion coming out soon. It's probably going to be some sort of change that they ended up making to an already existing champion that just never actually made it through. But now let's move along here to the next one right here. And again, if you guys do find a match for one of these images, we're not perfect. We definitely could have missed 1 or 2 of them, but there also might be a couple of ones that we didn't actually find in this list right here that still might not be in game. But that's a very scary looking orc right there. And then we got number 3 right here. And these are going up in ascending order in terms of their actual numbers. So the later we get in the list, the higher chance that these champions are, you know, possibly going to be coming out in the future, but they haven't been released. The earlier ones, maybe they just didn't make it to the game. They got changed, but the artwork and the portraits just somehow stayed in the game files. And then the next one was number 5, which was Candrafon, but we already found the match to that. So here's number 6. And then we've got number 7 here. And we've got number 8. And even while I was recording in the last few hours, Goctionni mentioned that he found what he believes to be another portrait that there's no match for in-game. So this is not a comprehensive list. This is just kind of what we could find in a day or so. So if you want to take the time to go through and look at all of those portraits and try to match what they are to their corresponding champion or boss in-game, of course, I'll leave all that stuff in the description so you can take a look at it in more detail if you guys want to. But that is the last one right there on the list. So lots of interesting stuff, lots of mysteries, some of them solved, some of them we are still exploring, but this was definitely a fun video to kind of get into. So I'm really hoping that you guys enjoyed watching it just as much as I enjoyed making it. But that is pretty much going to be it for today. As time goes on, who knows what other mysteries will be solved, but who also knows what other mysteries might pop up. But I have to say, of course, before ending off, a major shout out and credit to Goctionni for providing this information as well as helping me with this video. So thank you very much for everything. And if you do want to take a look at this in more detail, I will leave a link in the description to where you can find more information about the images used in this video. So once again, thank you very much, Goctionni. And that is going to be it for today. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did and you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to the channel if you want to help out. Leaving a quick like means more than you can imagine. So thank you to all of you guys who do that. And more Raid Shadow Legends videos should be popping up on the screen. Over 225 raid videos on the channel. Feel free to check some of them out. But if not, until next time, have a great day, everyone. Take care. And this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.